Well, meanwhile, Gillian, there's a blunt message to Beijing and a show of might from the Pentagon. A U.S. naval destroyer sailed within 12 miles of a disputed island in the South China Sea. You know, it's the second time under President Trump that a Navy vessel has disregarded China's territorial claims in the region, and comes as the president says he is losing patience with North Korea and Beijing's failure to rein in Kim Jong-un's regime. So what will happen as the U.S. continues to confront China? You know, the president is set to talk on the telephone later tonight with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Ambassador Kurt Volker joins us as a former U.S. ambassador to NATO. Ambassador, good to see you. I mean, this is getting kind of hairy. It seems like a cat and mouse game with these artificial islands and with the other islands that China claims. How do you think this will play out?
Well, I think what the U.S. is doing now is actually necessary. China, for some time, has been unilaterally changing what had been a fairly stable order in the South China Sea for some time. They've declared that this is their territory, and then they've started to militarize that claim, both with islands and airstrips and so forth. What's important here is that the U.S. push back on that while still trying to talk to and cooperate with China, and that's where I think we are. We need to show that we do not recognize these claims, and we believe in freedom of navigation. At the same time, we have a lot of issues to work with China. We like to do that cooperatively. So getting the right balance is key, and that's where I think we need this kind of pushback.
Well, when do we know that balance is too much? I mean, how do you know there's a tripwire?
Well, I think it's been the opposite. I think that we've seen too little pushback up to this point, and that has just encouraged China to keep going. And so by doing this, we're hoping to send a signal that says we've seen enough. We're not going to be accepting these claims, but let's get on with doing things that we all need to deal with, such as North Korea.
And you know, Ambassador, speaking of North Korea, there's been some stronger actions by the administration. This past week, they sanctioned a Chinese bank, as well as, of course, announcing the sale of $1.4 billion worth of military equipment and armaments to Taiwan, and that certainly got under the skin of the Chinese.
Well, there are different things. First off, on North Korea, you have to give China some credit. China, over a long period of time, not just 1 year, but say over 10 years, has changed its relationship with North Korea substantially. Nonetheless, there is a lot more they could be doing to put pressure on that regime. And,
and they haven't deterred them. I mean, they obviously haven't deterred them from their ballistic missile tests and from the nuclear tests, although we haven't had the one that was suspected or anticipated a few weeks ago. That's
exactly right. And that's why trying to pressure China or encourage China, whatever it takes to get them to do more, is so critical. On the Taiwan issue, this is something that is not unusual. The U.S. has had a relationship with the government in Taiwan for a long time. We've provided arms sales in the past. We recognize China as a one state, one country, but we've had this direct relationship with Taiwan, and we wouldn't want to see any kind of unilateral military effort to impose a solution. And as a result of that, it's important for Taiwan to be able to have some self-defense forces.
Well, we remember the president's phone call when he was president-elect with the Taiwanese president. That really ticked off China. And let me read you what the Chinese embassy in Washington said about that arms sale. They said, quote, "It grossly interferes in China's domestic affairs." They forgot the word "in." Jeopardizes China's sovereign and security interests. The Chinese government and Chinese people have every right to be outraged. The Chinese side has logged serious representation to the U.S. side and reserves every right to take further action. The wrong move of the U.S. side runs counter to the consensus reached by the two presidents in Mar-a-Lago. Well, in about 8 hours from now, President Trump will be speaking to President Xi on the telephone, 8:45 tonight from the Oval Office. That is substantially on North Korea, but do you think this issue will be raised, and what does the president say?
Well, there's no doubt that the Chinese will want to raise this and will raise this issue. And that statement that you read out is frankly not surprising. That's what the Chinese say every time. That's what it means, in fact, when we say we have a difference of view over how to implement this one China policy. We're not challenging the fact of a one China, but we've had very, very different views about these issues for a long time. The U.S. has long had a relationship of helping Taiwan to have some serious self-defense forces, and that will continue. And I think President Trump can calmly say that and also calmly talk about the common challenges that we have. China is a very big country, very powerful, and a country that we need to work with. and at the same time where we are going to have some differences, and we've got to have clear lines on those.
And finally, at the same time, as you mentioned, that we are working with them on some issues. Look, they've got their first aircraft carrier. They're going to be sailing that into Hong Kong. They certainly showed a show of might, a military might, with the Hong Kong celebration. So how do you think, at the end of the day, you know, what will happen? Will we see some type of a confrontation in the South or East China Sea? Will there be an accommodation of North Korea? And what, in Doran's name, will Beijing finally do something about Kim Jong-un? Can they do it, or has the horse already bolted the barn?
Well, first off, on the South China Sea, I think you're going to see a continuation as to where we are. More of the same. No conflict. Neither side wants to have a military conflict. We may have a couple close brushes, but that will result in communication directly between the militaries, deconfliction, and some measure of stability there. When it comes to North Korea, I think China is trying to figure out how they can shape the behavior of Kim Jong-un, and the fact is they haven't been able to do that thus far. That's why it looks like they need to do more. How that plays out, though, is unpredictable, because Kim Jong-un himself is a very unpredictable player, very determined to preserve his own grip on power and his own regime.
They may be worried, obviously, about him as well as we are. Ambassador Kurt Volker, thank you for joining us. A pleasure to have you today on this Sunday, July 4th weekend here on the Fox News Channel.
Thank you.
Of course.